the Oscars, there's news. They will now let films bypass inclusion reporting. Why would the Oscars do that? I thought in 2020, everybody said, we're gonna do better. Well, per Deadline, a quiet change in enforcement protocols has occurred. Imagine that. Where feature films entered in this year's Academy Awards contest will be able to avoid reporting gender, race, and disability data required by new inclusion standards, governing Best Picture contenders simply by opting out of contention for the top Oscar. That's all you have to do, okay? Policy shift, which became apparent in recent changes to the frequently asked questions addendum to the Academy's representation and inclusion standards entry platform, could free dozens or even hundreds of films vying for Oscars other than Best Picture from a previously declared requirement of all 300 or so awards contenders submit identity data regardless of their Best Picture proposals. Deadline again with the reporting. Until recently, the Academy's fact advisory noted that all features submitted for Oscar consideration were required to report detailed identity data on the platform. Because the Academy was unable to say in advance which films might actually wind up in the Best Picture race, the only category for which inclusion standards will be enforced. By this week, however, that provision had been replaced with a new answer to question 13, which asks, am I required to create a raised submission for a film that I don't want to be considered for Best Picture? The new answer says, you will have the option to opt in or opt out for Best Picture consideration. If you do decide to opt out, then you do not need to fill out a raised form. Academy officials had no comment on the change, but people familiar with the revision said prior policy remained in force only through a 2-year soft rollout during which filmmakers were required to report on the platform while the standards were not yet enforced. Industry feedback and experience during the rollout led to the current policy. I guess he's giving the feedback on this one. Okay, I can just got someone in mind. My crystal ball tells me. In a further substantial change, these people said producers and distributors no longer are asked to identify cast and crew members by name when reporting on sex, race, disability issues. In its past form, the platform asked for such personal identification. With those changes, the Academy appears to have abandoned its previously described intent to collect identity data on a broad range of films across the industry. Even a modest number of opt-outs would create obvious holes in any database, making it a less than reliable foundation for promised reports and policy suggestions. Policy shift might reduce the administrative burden of monitoring a large number of films that have no real Best Picture prospects and could limit the need to disqualify films that don't meet inclusion standards by allowing at least some of those pictures to take themselves out of the running. But at the same time, Oscar voters might find themselves selecting from a reduced field of Best Picture contenders, dark horse contenders, and late season discoveries would have a shot only if they haven't removed themselves from contention in order to avoid the burden of identity reporting. I'm gonna let you take this off the top because gag me, okay? I could barely get through it, David Shuster, because I felt like something was about to come up, okay? I'm gonna let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, is transparency, diversity, is that somehow a burden? Is that what the Academy is now saying, that it's a burden for people who make films to sort of report and who's involved and what their nationality is and ethnicity and sexual orientation? That's a burden now? Well, you know what? If the Academy feels that way, then they just ought to opt out for every award. You know what? If you don't care about diversity, if you don't care about transparency, then let people apply for every Academy Award without doing any sort of reporting. But if you as an organization say that you do care about these things, like the rest of us care about them, then you need to enforce it and require for every award, every film, people have to submit this information. That's not gonna change, I guarantee. Some people are still gonna select one film for Best Picture because they like it more than another film, not based on who the cast was. But at least let the audience know whether these movies, whether these films, whether these production companies are actually subscribing to the kind of diversity and transparency that many of us have been demanding. It may not change how we view a film, but at least let the public know. Why is that a burden?
Wow. And to the people who, they said they were reacting to industry feedback. I don't think Viola Davis was one of the ones giving them feedback that led to this. this change in policy. I think we know some pretty powerful, of a certain hue, people said, we don't so much like this. You understand? We just don't really like this policy. So we don't want to do it. And the Academy said, well, you don't have to, okay? George Floyd is in our rearview mirror, and you don't have to. You don't have to. Wow. It's Rich.